Like I mentioned before, the French culture has a huge impact on Vietnamese culture, and in this part, the third part, which is culture, I have separated into three main parts, which is culinary culture, architecture, culture, and the final one is language, because language is part of culture. So we will move on to the first part of the third part, which is the culinary culture. Okay, so till now, the French cuisine still has a great impact on Vietnamese cuisine. There are a lot of dishes that the Vietnamese um, took the idea from the French and made it into our own. For example, like flan or bread, baguette, but we normally call bánh mì, and coffee, because actually like French is the the French is the person who um, introduced coffee to Vietnamese, and yeah. So here we have the two signature things that the French introduced to the Vietnamese. So the baguette. The baguette is one of the most famous French dishes, not only for local or domestic people, but also for French tourists. So whenever you go or whenever someone mention like France, you instantly think of a baguette. A baguette is like it's like a famous symbol of French, because French people, they love their baguette and cheese. Yeah, that is a thing, and that is a thing in France. And here in Vietnam, we took that idea and then we turn it into our own by adding uh, much more ingredients than just cheese. We add in sausages, we add in pate, we add in pickled vegetable, and make it into a banh mi, which is now like it's a very unique taste of Vietnam. Okay, so beside from bánh mì or baguette, we have another thing that the French introduced to the Vietnamese is the coffee. Coffee was first drink by France, I believe. But then Vietnam's coffee culture is now so developed that this drink is so everywhere and loved by young and old. And Vietnamese, like us, the Vietnamese, we have a twisted ways of drinking it. For example, we don't drink we don't just drink coffee with sugar and cream like the rest of the world. We would use like other special stuff that creates this specialties in the Vietnamese coffee. We would use like um, egg beaten, like the egg yolk beating with sugar, or we would use condensed milk instead of creamer and sugar, because the condensed milk is already so rich and so sweet. It just balances it off with the bitterness of the coffee. So that is the culinary culture. Next, I would like to tackle the architecture culture. Now, you know that the ancient France architecture has created great influence on the historical developments of Vietnamese architecture in general and Hanoi in particular. The influence of Asian French architecture on Vietnam is divided into many historical architecture styles. And here, from my research, I have found 6 significant architectural culture styles, which is pre-colonialism, uh, neoclassical, local France, Art Deco, Indochina, and Neo-Gothic. Yeah, so that is the 6 main styles of architecture. And there is an architect, American architect. His name is Emmanuel. He has some critiques about the architecture in Hanoi. He said, like, in an interview, he said that the architecture in Hanoi is very diverse. I feel that this city mixes many styles, notably classical French and Indochina architecture. But the special thing is that Hanoi architect is very unique, unlike anywhere else in the world. Since coming here, the buildings of French built were not completely in the French style, but mixes with local detail and elements, which creates, I think, creates a significant and unique attractions of Hanoi. And here I'm gonna move to the last part of culture is language. So the French culture influenced Vietnamese people in all aspects, including language. But Vietnamese does not use French as an official language. We only borrow words from France and transformed those words to be more suitable and easier to pronounce. For example, here I have 3 examples for the borrowed word. Here in France we have savon. In Vietnam is savon, and which means in English is soap. Beurre, French we have beurre, Vietnam beurre, and English is butter. Oh god, I don't want to talk this, like I'm like butchering the French. And we have here gâteau, and which in English means is cake. This is just like a 3 very, very basic examples of the borrowed words from French. And here's the thing. This is how foreigner feels about Vietnamese. Vietnamese is really difficult. And from my perspective, foreigner have a lot of difficulties in trying to learn Vietnamese. Some difficulties that we can name of is difficulty with tones or trouble with the pronouns. The trouble with pronouns, like for example in English, the pronouns is simple. It's like I, you, we, they. But in I, you, we, they, he, she, it. But then in Vietnam, there will be tôi, bạn, mày, tao, con, chú gì, cô, bác. I mean, it's endless. And there is a saying in Vietnam, which is phong ba bảo tao không bằng ngữ pháp Việt Nam, which literally translate into the hardships of struggling with a violent storm don't compare to the hardships of mastering Vietnamese grammar. I mean, it's so true because I'm a Vietnamese, but I'm 21 years old, but I still cannot mastering the Vietnamese grammar. It's something's haunted me and terrified me to my freaking soul, you guys. And last part is the religion. Okay, so by the end of the 18th century, the Catholicism has become a solid part of the Vietnamese spiritual and social landscape. And then in the 1930s, the first Vietnamese bishops were appointed, and discourses were gradually given to the care of local clergy. And after the 1954 exodus, there were more believers in the south than in the north of Vietnam. So that, my friend, that is the last part of my presentation. Thank you for listening, and please forgive me if I made some mistake, because I'm just trying my best. So thank you and have a great night.